27th, pleading guilty to 2 felony counts of manslaughter and 2 felony counts of assault DUI. A local road is causing major distress for drivers in the Druid City. Bear Creek Cutoff Road connects Old Montgomery Highway to Bear Creek Road and Highway 69 and appears to be covered in roofing nails. Social media posts showed 13 nails puncturing a tire. James Spann, ABC 3340, and Town Square Media Tuscaloosa chief meteorologist lets us know that for Memorial Day weekend to get ready, because cooler, drier air rolls into the state late tomorrow night, and we expect delightful weather for the holiday weekend. Sunny, pleasant days and fair, cool nights Saturday through Monday are expected. For more information on these and other local stories without a paywall, check out the all-new TuscaloosaThread.com or download the all-new Tuscaloosa Thread app.
Touchdown! Alabama wins!
The Alabama football countdown clock is driven by Crawford Insurance, Tuscaloosa's low-cost auto insurer. Call 752-6489 for a free quote today.
Well done! Well done!
There are 99 days until Alabama football.
Dominate!
Quarterback back at the 5, steps up, gets drilled. Yes, sir, he gets mashed. And that is going to be the ball game. 6, 5, 4, 3. They can't snap it. They can't stop it. They can't win it. Alabama wins the ball game.
Darian Thomas, linebacker, Alabama.
He was a nightmare for people that had to try to prepare for him because he had unique skills.
Just go get the quarterback. I felt sorry for some of those poor tackles that came in and had to go against him because they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Son, I gotta do better than this.
Lights out.
Sacking the cornerback is just like you devastate a city, or you cream a multitude of people. I mean, it's just like you put all the offensive players in one bag, and I just take a baseball bat and beat on the bag. So each time he came over there, I tried to tear his damn head off.
Let's play some football. Let's play some football.
The pressure is on. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Focus on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. Think about that. Don't think about how you feel, how tired you are, how hot it is. You got to put yourself on the field when you're playing football.
It's my honor to present the National Championship Trophy to Coach Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
To me, this is the ultimate team. All these guys bought into everything they needed to do to be the best players that they could be. There's more togetherness on this team than almost any team that we've ever had. And they had to overcome and persevere so much adversity through this season, and they've done it magnificently. And I'm so proud of this group for what they've been able to accomplish and going undefeated and winning the national championship.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome into Off the Edge. I am Jacob Harrison, your host. We're back on Fridays, baby. We have taken over once again your Friday evenings. Going to give you some more of the best sports analysis in T-Town right here, Off the Edge, Mondays and Fridays from 7 to 9. So glad you could be with us. It's a little cool outside. It actually feels good. I know Monday I freaked out because it was in the 90s. That quick little thunderstorm that we got made it feel good outside. I appreciate it. I still keep the window and the fan going though. But nonetheless, got a lot to get into, a lot of fun to have tonight. We have Stephen Lassan at 7:15 of Athlon Sports is going to join us, and we're going to discuss all things college football. We're going to take a national perspective, for the first time in a while, get some thoughts on guys like DJ Uiagalelei and what's next for Ohio State, who can try to compete with the Buckeyes now that they're in a post-Justin Fields life. And we'll also look at Athlon Sports and the guys that they picked. They had 4 teams of all SEC that they made for their selections just in time for all those sweet magazines to drop. So we'll get his thoughts on those selections. Alabama led the way in that regard, by the way, with 16 players, counting Henry Toto, the Alabama Crimson Tide dominating Athlon Sports picks for the preseason all SEC. Georgia did have 15, but nobody else in the entire conference was anywhere close to that. He will join us at 7:15. That's going to be very exciting. At 8 o'clock, we'll welcome in one of our fine interns. She's practically a softball reporter at this point. Katie Holac will join the show at 8 o'clock to discuss that clutch victory that the Alabama Crimson Tide softball team took home today against Kentucky in the Super Regionals, earning their way to Oklahoma City. They've still got to take care of Kentucky one more time, but from what we saw today, it sure looked like they can, in fact, get that done. We're also going to talk all the positive news surrounding Mac Jones, all the positive news surrounding Tua Tagovailoa. Hopefully, we'll get into the discussion that we were forced to kind of skip Monday with the depth on the defensive line. How there's 10 guys that you could reliably turn to on the defensive line for the Crimson Tide. We'll look at all of that and so much more throughout the night. Before we dive into anything too specific, I do have to remind you that the show is brought to you by Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com. I went in and checked in with Charlie the other day and picked up that Steelers hat that Tommy told me to go pick up. And first of all, I learned a few things. Apparently, this is like the hot spot for Alabama athletes now. So now, I mean, when you go in and you check out what Alabama Vintage has on the shelves, you might, have an opportunity to see who's going to walk through that door too. The players love it, and that means you're going to love it too. All the quality items, whether it's vintage shirts, jackets, starter jackets, you name it. Vintage hats, shoes. Charlie's got it all. Alabama Crimson Tide and pro football teams, pro NBA teams, pro hockey teams, you name it, Charlie has got it. And he'll hook you up. Alabama Vintage, 2210 University Boulevard under the Crimson awning across from City Hall. And a special little nugget about Alabama Vintage that we will get started on the show very, very soon in 2 weeks' time. Next week, we won't have a show. I'll be out of town. I'm taking a part-timer's vacation, which means I don't get paid to go on vacation. I relinquish my paycheck for a week. But
really?
Really? Cool. Yeah, it's a great idea. It's financially sound, right? Take care of your mentals. Regardless,
Nice.
in 2 weeks' time, we will start a new tradition, a new bit on the show with Alabama Vintage. The first Friday of every month, Charlie will give me a vintage player of the month. And it will be up to the listeners, whether in the comment section, whether in a tweet or a post, or by calling in. We will give away gift cards to Alabama Vintage. Of course, we'll pull up the names that are able to guess the name correctly, and you can score yourself a sweet gift card to Alabama Vintage. We'll have more details on that 2 weeks' time. In 2 Fridays, we will get that started and give y'all some free stuff. Who doesn't like free stuff? Let's go. Free stuff at Alabama Vintage. Big thanks to Charlie for sponsoring the show. So, initial thoughts before we get to Stephen Lassan. I watched both the baseball game and the softball game today. Softball, supremely more entertaining today, by the way. Supremely. Nothing against our guys out on the big diamond, but they did not get the job done. Got crushed, run ruled in 7 innings, 11-0 by the Tennessee Vols, who just a few days ago, Alabama had held off in 11 innings, I want to say, in a 4-3 victory over the Vols to advance through the winners bracket. But nonetheless, they have fallen completely out of the SEC tournament now with this loss. And We don't know if their season is over. We'll know that on Monday evening. But I got to say, the way that game transpired, the way that it ended, not feeling too confident about them getting a shot in the NCAA tournament. Just my gut feeling. They've battled through a lot, though. And I said it this morning on Inside the Locker Room, hanging out with Joe and McKalen. I'm still proud of what the team accomplished. And I'm still proud of the work that Brad Bohannon has put into this program. I think he's doing just as good of a job as any coach on this campus. And he's dealing with just as much, if not more, adversity, too. You had to handle all the roster shakeups that happened with COVID, with allowing players to come back and that making it difficult on freshmen. You have to deal with all the injuries that this team has had to sustain, including losing a potential number 1 overall MLB draft pick in Connor Prelip to Tommy John surgery this past week. And he's been unavailable for the majority of the season. So that makes it incredibly difficult. Then you start having inconsistencies at the plate. Not much you can do about that, except continue to work on it, continue to improve, continue to recruit. And I think that's what Brad Bohannon will do moving forward. And I got nothing but the highest praise for him and his guys if this is, in fact, the end of the season. If not, we'll continue to cheer him on, and we'll see what happens in the NCAA tournament. As for the girls, man, that softball team is legit. I am never not impressed when Montana Fouts is in the circle. The way that she commands the entire gig from start to finish. It is her show. And she dominates every single batter that comes up. And there were a few shenanigans that helped out the Wildcats today. But you can't hang your hat on those. You gotta be good enough to beat the other team and the refs sometimes. But regardless, the performance that she put on today was nothing short of spectacular. And I do hope that she's the one in the circle tomorrow, just to ensure that this team is going to Oklahoma City for the College World Series. I think they've got the goods to win it. And as long as Montana Fouts is in the circle, this team can win any game they play. Of course, nothing against any of the other pitchers. I feel confident in them as well, should they have to step in at any given point throughout this season. But Montana Fouts is the star of that team. And the fact that she was able to get that final strike with the bases loaded, the count loaded, and a packed Rhodes House, and send that baby right down the middle, right over the plate, fearless. An incredible way to get that final strikeout and win the game 4-3 after a destructive 4th inning from the Alabama softball team. We'll get into all that a little bit later in the show, but right now we're going to take our first break. We're going to get ready for Stephen Lassan of Athlon Sports. He'll join us in the next segment. Don't go anywhere. This is Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. I am Jacob Harrison. We've got a great guest coming up right here, Stephen Lassan of Athlon Sports. We're going to dive into the Athlon Sports all SEC team, as well as the entire world of college football. Kind of get a national perspective for the first time in a while, get an idea of some of the quarterbacks changing up throughout the country. Stephen, welcome into the show, man. How's it going tonight?
Hey, Jacob. It's great to talk to you. It's Friday night. We're talking college football. It's a long weekend. So, hey, things are looking up for us.
Absolutely, man. It's a long off season, so you got to kind of pull where you can and analyze as close as you can. And by August, you'll be wore out and hyped up at the same time. So diving straight into the All SEC selections for Athlon Sports. Alabama, of course, no surprise. 16 selections if you count Henry To'oTo'o, which leads the conference for you guys. 4 teams were selected, but I mean, just from a perspective, Alabama's dominance is not something that we're, shocked by. But when Alabama loses this kind of talent, losing 8 starters offensively, 3 of the better players defensively, it's something that they're used to. But nonetheless, when they lose that kind of firepower, and you're losing guys like Jalen Waddle and your starting quarterback, 3 offensive linemen, the all-time leading rusher, the Heisman Trophy winner, it can be a little bit ridiculous just to think that Nick Saban is still able to reload to the point where even during the offseason, when there's so much unknowns around this team, we media guys and we analysts come together and we still say, yeah, well, they're still that good.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, when we do our predictions or all conference teams or rankings with Alabama, there is definitely the benefit of the doubt. And I think when you just kind of step back for a second, it's the best program in college football led by the best coach. And you see all the changes around Nick Saban throughout his tenure, but one constant remains, and that's Nick Saban. And that's why every year, regardless of personnel losses, we're probably going to pick Alabama, barring some kind of surprise, to make the playoff. I think when you just look at the way this coaching staff develops talent, the way they put it in position to succeed. And certainly, as you mentioned, the losses on both sides of the ball are pretty significant. But I think when you start looking at the next guys in the kind of pipeline, Bryce Young, Brian Robinson, Will Anderson was one of the guys I thought didn't get enough credit last season. Christian Harris, we expect to step up. So while Alabama is losing a lot, the next wave of stars is ready to step up, and that's definitely reflected on our all-conference team with, as you mentioned, the most selections in the SEC if you count To'oTo'o.
Absolutely. And one of the things, of course, it's impossible to ignore the quarterbacks. But I thought it was very interesting that Matt Corral gets the nod as the first team quarterback, Bryce Young at second, and then JT Daniels at third. Of course, the entire conference is going to war with unproven commodities as their signal callers. Almost every single team is going into the season with a brand new quarterback, and JT Daniels isn't brand new, but he does only have 3 or 4 starts under his belt. So I think it's very interesting that he kind of slips in there under Bryce Young. What do you make of the quarterback situation in the SEC, and what kind of led you guys into naming Matt Corral the number 1 spot?
Yeah, I think for starters at the quarterback position, we have 5 SEC teams projected to finish in our top 25. And all 5 of those teams will turn to a quarterback that hasn't started a full season. You mentioned JT Daniels, 4 starts under his belt at Georgia. At LSU, it's either Miles Brennan or Max Johnson, but neither of those guys have started for a full season. So I think this position is a wild card, but also at the same time, I think it kind of goes back to what we were kind of just getting at is, with Alabama, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, and rightfully so, because, Bryce Young, the talent is there. We've seen it in limited sample size. The track record for Alabama on offense now, Steve Sarkisian is gone. I think Bill O'Brien's just going to keep this offense rolling. So our discussion at the quarterback position kind of boiled down to this. Matt Corral is the one quarterback that has the experience over a full season in his system. And we know that Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, they're going to put up points. They may not be able to stop anybody, but they're going to put up 40 points a game. So I think the stats are going to be there for Matt Corral. He has the experience, and he's the sure thing at this point. We really like Bryce Young, and I think he's going to have a monster season under Bill O'Brien in this offense. So we have him second team, and the conversation between our staff among Bryce Young versus JT Daniels was very close. I think what we're getting at when we discuss these two, and throw Matt Corral, they're all top 10 quarterbacks nationally. They're all going to be very good. We are projecting ahead. It is tough to weigh stats versus projection and proven at this point, but we think both Bryce Young, JT Daniels going to be very good this year, and Bryce Young with the talent combined with the track record, especially with Mac Jones and Tua both being Heisman finalists, we think Bryce Young picks right up where those guys left off.
And when it comes to Matt Corral, I think I'm one of the few people around here, I feel like, that has said the team that I'm watching is Ole Miss. It's not LSU, not Texas A&M. It's Ole Miss because of the Lane Kiffin factor and because Matt Corral, like, he's the guy with the experience. Now, there's times where he reminds you of Bo Wallace from a few years ago, where he could light you up, or he could throw 7 interceptions from back-to-back weeks. But regardless, I mean, do you kind of get that impression? If you've got the quarterback, that's half the battle, and the rest can kind of follow suit. I think back to the 2018 Crimson Tide. They had Tua and they had the offensive weapons, and that defense was abysmal, but they still got to a national championship. I don't know if that's Ole Miss's situation, but at the very least, a top contender in the West due to what they've got at quarterback, right?
Yeah, no question. I mean, we've also seen kind of the evolution of college football in recent years of kind of it's a revolution towards offense. And we saw what LSU did when they had Joe Burrow. And we've also seen what's happened with Alabama, the offensive explosion the last couple of years. Shameless plug, there's a great feature in the Athlon Sports Annual about offensive explosion in the SEC. So it really is. That quarterback play in college football is so important. Once you find your guy, he can kind of alleviate concerns elsewhere. And when you look at what Matt Corral did last season, big-time numbers in the first year, and that came after kind of an unsettled offseason with limited spring, fall workouts. So now that he has a full offseason to learn under Lane Kiffin, I mean, they can take that up a notch. And you compare Ole Miss to LSU, which Miles Brennan, Max Johnson have shown some promise, but they haven't done it over a full season. Texas A&M, whether it's Haynes King or Zach Calzada, there's still a question mark, albeit Jimbo Fisher's done a pretty good job. But that Ole Miss team they're going to give up a lot on defense, but this offense can score with pretty much anybody in the SEC. And so I think they have a chance to be a top 25 team. Those interceptions that Matt Corral threw, they were all in losses. So if they can clean that up, I could easily see Ole Miss getting to 8-4 and finishing in the top 25 this year.
No doubt. And not to mention, I mean, just the way that Lane Kiffin is wired, the way that he went toe-to-toe with Nick Saban last year was mightily, mightily impressive. They weren't able to really capitalize on it, but no matter, the Rebels they've got some good things brewing there with the Lane train. But I'm sure, as you probably guessed by the name of the show, when you talk quarterbacks, you got to talk about the guys that are trying to eat them alive. And I know Will Anderson's in the first team, and I know Alabama returns a powerful pass rush alongside Chris Allen. But Alabama notwithstanding, I mean, they're ridiculously deep on the defensive front, and their pass rushers are probably the two best in the SEC. But who are some of the other teams around the league that have high-profile pass rushes that can make it difficult on these new quarterbacks trying to get ready and settled into these new systems?
I think the first thing that jumps to my mind is when we were putting together the all-SEC team, it was actually pretty thin at defensive line this year. Normally, when we do our all-SEC team, we're basically thinking that a lot of times second and third team guys are considered for All-America honors. And it really wasn't the case this year. I think when you look up front, there's a lot of turnover at some of these positions from some of the usual contenders. And it's almost like a kind of a running back by committee almost as well. Like you're rotating a lot of guys. So maybe there's not that one standout. But I think the first team that I would look at is Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher has done a really nice job of recruiting and developing those big guys up front. DeMarvin Leal, a guy that probably didn't get enough pub at the end of last season for all conference honors. We have him on our All-America team. Texas A&M is rock solid on defense up front. They have one of the better defensive lines in the country. Same thing for Georgia. A little different because they're not necessarily a four-man front, but you throw Jordan Davis in who can dominate that interior. You throw in Adam Anderson off the edge and the way that they've recruited at linebacker. Really think Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M are three of the better fronts in the league. LSU is experienced. They just got to get better production this year. And Florida and Auburn, I would say, are kind of in that next year as well. Some question marks, but also some talent and also track record. So despite being a turnover at the defensive line and some uncertainty there and maybe not the usual cast of standouts, the SEC still has 6 or 7 of the better defensive fronts in college football.
Talking to college football editor for Athlon Sports, Stephen Lassan. Stephen, now going to a more national stage, when it comes to the Pac-12, even though they showed a little bit of excitement, we didn't get a real Pac-12 after dark, so we didn't get a real impression of what that conference really was last year. And for the past few years, they've just been beating the hell out of each other and always kind of making it difficult on their own conference to get into the conversation of the college football playoff. But I know this year they've got some exciting quarterbacks, Keaton Slovis with USC, Jaden Daniels, Arizona State, and Oregon is always a fierce competitor, especially with Kayvon Thibodeau coming off the edge. What should college football fans be expecting out of the guys on the West Coast now that they've got a chance at a full off season and a normal college football schedule?
I think the first thing is, you mentioned it, they tend to beat up on each other. That's, with 9 conference games, that there's not a lot of separation in some of those contenders at the top. So I think you're probably going to see the Pac-12 champion fall somewhere 10th, 11th, 12th in most preseason projections. Oregon, I think, is the team to beat. They're the one team that when you look at recruiting, they're recruiting the athleticism and speed on defense, and not to mention they find ways to score 30, 35 points a game. They have a question mark at quarterback, but I think based on track record and Joe Moorhead, of course, being the offensive coordinator, I think they're going to be just fine. They are the team to beat, and they play Ohio State in week 2. That's a huge showdown for the Pac-12 and for Oregon's playoff hopes. Once you get beyond that, Washington, a very interesting team. They only played 4 games last year. Jimmy Lake is a second-year coach, but we really didn't learn a lot about Washington other than based on track record. Great defense. They can run the ball, but what do they get out of the quarterback position? And I think when you look at the South Division is going to have a really fun race to win the kind of that division, because we have Arizona State winning the division. I do not have projected Herm Edwards and Arizona State to win the division 4 years ago, but man, they have recruited well. They have developed talent. You mentioned Jaden Daniels. They have pretty much everybody back from last year. And USC has just kind of been underachieving under Clay Helton. They've got Keaton Slovis back, but their offensive line is pretty scary and thin. And so I think that could be really problematic. And of course, we need to throw Utah in there, rock solid as always under Kyle Whittingham. But I think the bottom line is, I don't see a playoff contender here, but I see like a really fun, entertaining Pac-12 after dark kind of season where, 8 teams could be bowl eligible and some fun races at the top.
Hey, I tell you, I'll know that we're officially back to normal when it's midnight in the middle of September and I'm watching 2 mid-tier Pac-12 teams beat each other 20-22.
Give me some sort of random Oregon State, Washington State 44-41 shootout too.
It's going to be great. I can't wait for that sense of normalcy to come back. But for the Pac-12, I think to ever get back into the conversation with college football playoff, they got to wait for this expansion that is no doubt down the road. You mentioned Ohio State with Oregon in their opener. Ohio State is another team, brand new quarterback. I know they've got 3 guys that they're trying to sift through to figure out what they want to do. And next year they've got an incredible freshman coming in Ewers. That Ryan Day is an incredible offensive mind. But if ever there was a time for another team in the Big Ten to strike at the Buckeyes, it would have to be this year with the shakeup at quarterback. I know they've got all the weapons all around. Olave, they've got Harrison on the other side on the defense going off the edge too. But who is there a team? I know Michigan's down. I know Michigan State's down. Is there a team, though, in the Big Ten that can take advantage of this changing of the guard with the Buckeyes?
I think there are two teams that come to mind. The first is Indiana. Indiana gave Ohio State a scare last season in Columbus. I think Indiana was probably, to some extent, they were a little fortunate with their record. They caught some breaks with turnovers. Of course, the first game of the year against Penn State could have went either way. I think Indiana, of course, with Michael Penix, their quarterback, coming off his third season-ending injury, if he's healthy, he's the type of difference maker that can give Ohio State's defense a lot of trouble, because that's a group that struggled last year. Not sure if the secondary is going to be a lot better this year. Indiana gets Ohio State at home this year. So Indiana, a little bit of potential to crash the party. I think we're looking at Penn State and Michigan thinking both of these teams are going to be better, but probably not better enough to get past Ohio State. So I think if you're looking for someone who can knock off Ohio State, it's Indiana within the East. Over in the West, Wisconsin has the type of defense that in a one-game scenario for the conference championship that could give Ohio State a lot of trouble. They're experienced, and we saw this a couple years ago in the Big Ten championship game with the way they can get after the quarterback and play coverage. They can give Ohio State some trouble. So I think we'll see Wisconsin get back to being Wisconsin, strong offensive line, ground game, pretty solid quarterback play to go with a good defense. I think Wisconsin's the second best team in the Big Ten. I think the gap between Wisconsin and Ohio State is pretty large, but also at the same time, anything can happen in one of those one-game scenarios with that defense that Wisconsin can bring.
Yeah, and of the three juggernauts, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State is the one most likely to drop those games to teams that you wouldn't expect, especially when they're on the road. But speaking of Clemson, a lot of people think Trevor Lawrence one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history, and they'd certainly have a right to believe that. But I think this DJ Uiagalelei guy coming behind him can be just as good. A specimen quarterback, 6'4", 6'5", 230, 240, cannon arm, great accuracy, can run too. Here in Tuscaloosa, we got to keep a close eye on what the Tigers in South Carolina are doing, more so than the Tigers across the state. What can Alabama fans expect to see out of the other quarterback of the 2020 class?
No question about it. I mean, he is an impressive quarterback. And not to mention, first of all, go back to last season. Started 2 games kind of thrown in there when Trevor Lawrence was out against Boston College, led him to a comeback victory, goes on the road against Notre Dame, throws for over 400 yards. I mean, no big deal for a true freshman, just goes out there and throws for 400 yards in one of the toughest environments at night last year in college football. So Clemson does not have a quarterback concern. I think elsewhere on the roster, defensive line is the best in college football, according to the Athlon Sports ratings in the magazine. I think if there is a spot that Clemson could have problems, it's the same 2 positions that tripped them up last year. It's secondary and offensive line. We saw Ohio State take advantage of both. Clemson gets Georgia in the season opener. And it's a huge game for both teams, because if Clemson does not win that game, I don't think they're going to play a ranked team until they get to North Carolina or Miami in the ACC championship game. So, playoff positioning might be on the line for both teams, but we're going to find out right away how much Clemson's offensive line has improved and their secondary against JT Daniels in Georgia. So it is a high-level, high-stakes season opener for Clemson, but no question, quarterback play, talent, track record, coaching, it's all there for Clemson to make another run at the national title this year.
Talking to Stephen Lassan, national college football editor for Athlon Sports. Stephen, as far as the group of 5 goes, Cincinnati had a hell of a run last year. I thought that they at least deserved to be more in the conversation for that spot that Notre Dame just filled. But nonetheless, they go in and they take on Georgia. It's a close game. Of course, Georgia has guys sit out. which kind of taints the whole experience for the Bearcats. But they do return Desmond Ridder and a few other pieces on that team. And I've seen some people here recently kind of getting behind Coastal Carolina. But who is the king this year of the group of five? Is it one of those two, or is somebody set to surprise us as the Chanticleers did last year?
It's definitely Cincinnati. And I think the interesting thing about Cincinnati is, first of all, as you mentioned, experienced quarterback, fourth-year starter, Desmond Ridder, very productive, and also is getting better at this point of his career. The defense for Cincinnati, it's a pretty dominant defense. I mean, defensive line, secondary are very impressive. They get two shots at Power 5 ranked teams this year, Notre Dame and Indiana. Both of those on the road are huge opportunities for this team to make a case to be in the college football playoff, because I think they're probably going to run the table in the AAC. There's no other AAC team ranked in our preseason top 25. UCF is the closest one, but I think the gap between Cincinnati and everybody else in that conference is wide. So it's not necessarily a 2-game season, but if you're Cincinnati and you want to get in the playoff, you've got to run the table. You've got to be impressive, and you've got to win those two non-conference games. So I think Cincinnati, even if they lose those two, they're still the top group of 5 team. Coastal Carolina, Louisiana, kind of in that next tier. Curious about Boise State, new first-year coach, bring a lot of talent back from last year's team. Get a shot at Oklahoma State, BYU, and UCF in the season opener. So I think the Broncos might be the one team that's not going to start the year in the top 25, but certainly based upon track record, they will be somebody to watch along with Nevada from the Mountain West.
Yeah, Carson Strong down there at in Nevada. Yeah, that guy's legit.
Yeah, for sure.
Not too bad of a quarterback up there on the blue turf either. Stephen, man, we thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight and giving us some perspective on the national college football scene. Why don't you let the folks know where they could check out your work as well as where they can pick up one of those fresh Athlon sports magazines?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was fun to talk to you. And certainly, anytime we can talk SEC is always a good Friday night. At athlonsports.com, if you go to our website, the very top, there's a buy your magazine link here. Takes you to our online store. You get the national or the SEC edition shipped to you from our online store. Athlonsports.com, we've got college football content every day of the year, a bunch of off-season stuff coming. So if you're bored and you're looking for college football content, we've got you covered.
Is it really the off season if it's almost June and you're not bored?
That's true.
It's life-sustaining work you guys at Athlon do, I promise you.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Go give them a follow at Athlon. Steven, thanks so much for hanging out with us, man.
Hey, anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Steven Lassan of Athlon Sports hanging out with us. Man, I mean, just the world of college football. That got me pumped up. Just thinking about the entire country, the way that things are shaping out, the talent, the new breed of talent, by the way, too. I mean, we kind of got lulled in there the past 2 or 3 years where we had kind of similar talent hanging around. Alabama had so many seniors hang around for this national championship season last year. But it's an exciting season. I got myself all pumped up for 3 more months to wait for college football. Good job, Jacob. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll dive into more Alabama Crimson Tide Sports Talk. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. welcome back into Off the Edge. I'm Jacob Harrison. We just got done with our conversation with Stephen Lassan. Got me pretty fired up for some college football. I know we got 3 months to wait, but man, the turnover across the country, especially at quarterback. I mean, a lot of the big name quarterbacks are either from the Pac-12 or they're from Group of 5 schools, and then there's all the unproven guys that are in the SEC and the ACC, with the exception of like Sam Howell, Mike Penix. But for the most part, it's a lot of guys that we haven't seen through a full season. Very interesting that Matt Corral got the nod as the first team All-SEC from Athlon Sports. If you missed that conversation, go to our podcast center, Tide109.com, and check that out. Speaking of Tide109.com, wrote my article today on Calvin Ridley because Calvin Ridley is already the number one receiver of the Atlanta Falcons, right? Like, we've come to that. We can admit that, right, Tommy? Calvin Ridley is the number one receiver, has been for...
You really just don't want me to have fun tonight, do you?
No, I really do. I love you, Tommy.
First Friday show, and it's like, hey, look what hat Tommy wore. Let's see how much we can beat Tommy up and see how much he likes it. I'm so glad that this entire show is streamed so people in Atlanta can see how much in pain I am over this whole entire Julio situation. I'm surrounded by a Steelers fan, and if we can get Kim in on the shot, I got a Boston fan right next to me. It is game over for the Paradise. He is off the edge.
The Steelers don't hurt your feelings.
Ekiyor.
All
right. Now that I'm done being an idiot, and once again, it was about Calvin Ridley. Yes, that he is the number one receiver.
Yes.
You could already make the argument, especially last year when Julio was down all the time with the hamstring problems, that he was number one. And even with how terrible Dirk Cutter was, I would be more confident of pulling Kim, putting a headset on her, and saying, pick your favorite offensive play and run it. She could probably read a defense better than Dirk Cutter can. Actually, she probably is better than Dirk Cutter because a wet paper bag is. Yeah, even with all of that crap that he had to put up with, Calvin Ridley will be the number one. And then Kyle Pitts will be right behind him, if not matching exactly with him. And I guess Russell Gage will be the third that you go to, because not only can he catch, he can throw. It's been shown before, since we don't have Sanu anymore, who I loved Sanu, by the way. Just having two tall receivers was perfect. But yeah, Calvin Ridley's number one, obviously, no questions asked. Which, by the way, I still can't believe 5 years later that he fell to Atlanta.
No, neither could I. That was a bizarre drop for him. But at the same time, too, like, there's no replacing Julio Jones. I say this in the article. There's no replacing Julio Jones. That's impossible. But at the very least, for the past 2 seasons, you've had 2 number one wide receivers. And now you go, okay, now we just have 1 number one receiver, and he's just outside that elite tier that Julio Jones resides in, alongside DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, and those kind of characters, right? But at the same time, and dude's had basically two 10-touchdown seasons in 3 years. He's lived up to the expectations of being a first-round pick, and he's played incredibly well when Julio Jones has not been on the field for the Falcons, which, to be honest, is quite a lot. And last year, he got 30% of the target share, 11 targets per game, and if you're a fantasy guy, almost 20 fantasy points per game on normal scoring schemes. He's got the goods. And then you pair that up with what Kyle Pitts brings. No, you haven't replaced Julio Jones, but you have traded in an older unicorn for a much newer, shinier, more glittery unicorn that nobody's ever seen before. What Kyle Pitts brings to the table is unique and unknown to the NFL. So it's going to open up more opportunities. And when you compare what Arthur Smith is going to have to do to what he was able to do in Tennessee, the running game in Atlanta is not the same. Like, obviously, you don't bring Derrick Henry with you, but you also simply don't have an elite running back. You don't have a starting caliber. You don't have a bell cow running back in Atlanta, right? So he's not going to be able to lean too terribly much on the running game like he did in Tennessee, Arthur Smith. But look at how he utilized A.J. Brown and how he utilized Corey Davis. and how oftentimes those crossing routes that are implemented so well in his scheme allowed for yards after the catch, which is not something that Calvin Ridley has done a whole lot of. He's kind of been the deep target for Atlanta. He leads the league in deep targets, believe it or not. Not Tyreek Hill, not DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley. So he's pretty legit in that regard. But you give him those opportunities underneath, that those windows are going to open up just simply because of Kyle Pitts and because of the fact that Calvin Ridley, I'm sure he gets more respect within NFL circles than he does from an outside perspective, but that guy's been overshadowed. And, last year all he did was go out and catch 90 passes for 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns, all while being disrespected, right? A week in and week out, I'd find myself wanting to name him the Bama Pro of the Week last year and couldn't do it because they didn't win the game. That's how good he was. He was keeping up with Derrick Henry in that regard, as far as being that vital weapon that was the difference maker for his team. He's that good, and he's only going to have more opportunities. When you look at how A.J. Brown was utilized with the Tennessee Titans offense, Calvin Ridley is not the same type of player as A.J. Brown, but he will fill that same sort of role, and he's going to take advantage of more crossing routes as well as those deep shots. And, I don't know if the Falcons have enough to compete in that race for second place in the NFC South. I just know that the Saints and the Panthers also have that kind of question. And therefore, the Falcons have at least 4 games on the schedule where they feel like, okay, we can win that. And I know that that's not a lot, but when you pair that in with the other winnable games on the season, if you're able to handle the Saints and the Carolina Panthers, then you've got a situation on your hands where you find yourself gaining confidence and experience, and in the end, an opportunity to compete. And that's how the Falcons have to get it done, because they're not going to have the running game. There's still the questions on the defense. But at the same time, when you consider what Julio Jones is going to give you back, at this point, I'd be shocked if he's not a New England Patriot on June 1st. The biggest reason why is because of Stephon Gilmore. The Titans already have the struggles going on with their cap situation that the Patriots don't, but the Patriots also have a trump card where they can dangle out Stephon Gilmore and say, hey, we'll give you Stephon Gilmore, one slightly used Stephon Gilmore, and we promise his quad is perfectly fine. But you can have that, and we'll give you a second and a third down the road, and you just give us Julio Jones. That's it. That's an easy trade to see from both sides. And that gives the Falcons that one extra piece that they need on defense to help get that rebuild started going on the other side. And you pair him up with A.J. Terrell, who surprised many by how well he played as a rookie. Then you're well on your way to figuring things out on defense, and you'll have a few pieces alongside Deion Jones and a few others. So I think at the very least, Calvin Ridley kind of takes over as 1A, 1B with Matt Ryan as far as best player on the team. And if you can switch Julio Jones for Stephon Gilmore in the process, then you've got 3 elite pieces right there and a lot more to work with. And if you want to be in win now mode, that might be the way to go, and just continue to lean on Calvin Ridley because he's got the goods to get it done. And I'm not a fantasy football guru. I'm pretty good. I haven't won a championship in a few years. So take my advice with a grain of salt. Early second round pick, PPR league, press click. Draft that sucker early in the second round. And thank me and etch my name on the trophy as well. We'll take the top of the hour break. You can always call in 205-342-9904 if you feel you want to contribute to the conversation. More than welcome to. At the top of the hour, though, we will be welcoming in our very own Katie Holac, who was in the Rhodes House today to witness that clutch victory by the Alabama Crimson Tide softball team. We'll talk with her about that victory and the weekend moving forward on the softball diamond. All that and more in the second hour of Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
779. Don't wait. Call now. 800-210-6779. 800-210-6779.
WTUG HD2 Northport and W265CG Tuscaloosa, a Town Square media station.
One man to beat, you can forget about it. Touchdown, Alabama.
Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app. The pressure is on. Lights out. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Quarterback back at the 5, steps up, gets drilled. Yes, sir, he gets mashed. And that is going to be the ball game. Alabama wins the ball game.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Now, here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge for the second hour. I'm Jacob Harrison. Got to remind you before we get started with our conversation with our very own Katie Holac. This show is brought to you by Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com. Check them out on Instagram. They've got a sale going on until next Monday, so be sure to head in there tomorrow and take advantage of the sale. 20% off, I think, is what Charlie told me. So go give them a visit. Pick you up a vintage Alabama Crimson Tide item, whether it be a commemorative T-shirt, awesome sweaters, starter jackets, all the amazing hats that he has lining the shelves. Go in there, tell him Off the Edge sent you, and keep in mind that in 2 weeks we will start a new segment, the Vintage Player of the Week, where we will do that at the first Friday of every month and start giving away some Alabama Vintage gift cards. Free stuff from Off the Edge. You got to love it. Right now, we're going to go to the hotline and welcome in our very own intern, basically the softball beat reporter, Katie Holac, who was in the Rhodes House to witness that amazing super regional victory for the Alabama Crimson Tide over the Kentucky Wildcats. What's going on, Katie?
Not much. What's going on with you, Jacob?
Just trying to make it through. It's the off season in football, so now I have to watch these diamond sports and learn something. I learned something today. And that's, it's not simply just down to the fact that Alabama has elite players, and it's not just the fact that, Patrick Murphy's an incredible coach and he made a very clutch decision late in the game that helped spurn the victory. But this is just a complete team that has no quit in them. Kentucky came in, you said it earlier tonight on Tide Tonight, how they came in, they were ready, for the challenge that was playing the number 3 team in the nation, and they brought it tonight against the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, they did. From inning 1, Kentucky's pitcher, Autumn Humes, wheeling and dealing. As an Alabama fan, that's not what you wanted to see. I think it was the first 3 innings. She threw 3 up, 3 down. So Alabama didn't even have a chance to get their offense going. It was a no-hitter up until the 4th inning when Bailey broke it off, and the Tide got 4 runs, which is ultimately the winning inning. That's what I want to call it.
No doubt. But when it comes to that, what was kind of surprising on the day was how often Montana was getting hit. That's not something I'm used to watching. Every time I watch, seemingly that's when she has a career game and has 13, 14 strikeouts and just makes these batters look silly. But today they were able to get some contact on her, not without a little bit of controversy, which we'll get into. But when it comes down to it, even with those, minor inconveniences at the plate for Montana, she still rocked it and had an incredible game, as we're used to seeing from her.
Yeah, in the last game of regional play, Patrick Murphy was talking about how you have to be, if you can't bring your A game, you have to be able to be in your C game. And Montana wasn't able to do that in the last game of regionals. And I was talking to some of the other writers there today, and I said, it didn't seem to me like she was on her A game today. and that could have been the case, but Stephanie and Frankel Prothro does such a great job preparing these pitchers. And I think, KB Side said today, Montana's on fire. She's a beast, and we trust her to get it done in the circle. So she's going to keep fighting through every pitch. And she got, I believe it was, the strikeout to end the game in the top of the seventh. And she has fire in her eyes every single game, whether you're fouling her off, whether you're hitting her, whether you're not. I think that's the type of grit that you want in a pitcher.
Yeah, it's kind of funny if you watch kind of like her facial expressions through the mask. Like, she's always very intense until the game is over, and that's when she kind of shows her excitement. But like, her demeanor still doesn't change though. Like, when she gives up the home run, like, she kind of stares at that 1,000-yard stare out past the boundary, but she locks back in and gets ready to go. And it's kind of the mark of what makes her so great, is her ability to stay consistent even when things don't appear to be going her way. And oftentimes this afternoon, what wasn't going Alabama's way were the check swings. I'm not a baseball or softball connoisseur, but I know that if if the bat crosses your chest, that's a swing and a strike. And apparently the third base umpire did not agree with that ruling today.
Yeah, the fans didn't either, and my aunt, I said on Tide Tonight, my aunt was actually watching the broadcast on TV. She said that the announcer said that the very first check swing should have been strike 3 call, and that was the first solo home run. And you had kind of talked about how things weren't really going Alabama's way, and even though Montana gave up that solo home run, she wasn't scared of it. It didn't change her demeanor at all. You had kind of brought up, and I wanted to make a point. Kentucky's pitcher, Autumn Humes, although she held it down for 3 innings in the circle, as soon as the first, Bailey got the first hit of the game, she just broke down in that 1 inning. And so I think it says a lot about a pitcher. Montana didn't let the home run bother her. She didn't let the, check swings bother her. She just plays her game, and I think that she's a really important part of that team.
Yeah, and Kentucky's pitcher Humes played a great game, both at the plate, I think, and as a pitcher. But I mean, that 4th inning, where in the first 3 innings, I think she had 32 pitches total, and then in the 4th inning alone, she doubled that number and got her pitching count up to like 66 or something like that. Walk through that 4th inning and how Bailey Hemphill got that started, and how Alabama was able to take advantage, take the lead, and then sustain it.
Yeah, so Bailey Hemphill, we started at the top of the lineup. So Alexis Mack started off, and I believe it was a ground out. I don't have my scorecard in front of me. But, Bailey came up, 1-1 count. She broke off that no-hitter. And, small ball is really important, I think, in the game of softball, and not a lot of people give it enough credit. But Kaylee Tao followed Hemphill with a single, and then Jenna Johnson did the same thing. Murphy in the press conference described Johnson's hit as a rocket up the middle, which I thought was really great. He said, nobody could score on her rocket, but that was the hit that loaded the bases. The speed on the base path is also really important in that inning. You have Cat Grill pinch ran for Bailey Hemphill. Then you have Tao and Johnson who have speed. KB Sides obviously has speed, and KB hit triple. And literally, if you watch the video, you can read my article on Tide 109. There's a video of KB Sides in her hit. Kaylee Tao actually almost passes Jenna Johnson on the base path, and I think that speed is what gave Alabama those 3 runs on that triple, because if you didn't have speed like that, I think it could have easily just been a double. And then after the triple, Maddie Morgan actually singled to send KB Sides home, And Murphy made a really great point. It was the winning run. And at the time, a lot of people didn't really think of Maddie Morgan's hit as that big of a hit. But when you look back on the game as a whole, if Maddie Morgan didn't reach base, the game would have been tied. It could have gone into extras, and who knows who could have won. So it was just a really great inning. Really, the fans were out of their seats. Everyone was screaming, and it was a wild inning.
And another point proven to the fact that it is simply a complete team. When it comes down to that final few minutes of the bottom of, the top of the seventh, where the bases are getting loaded, the Wildcats are starting to get some contact on Montana, and you get one, you get the second, and then you intentionally walk the fantastic hitter for the Wildcats, and you kind of put all the onus right there on Montana. Bases are loaded. There's a full count sitting at 3-2, and it comes down to one pitch. First of all, talk about, because to me, it was absolute brilliance by Patrick Murphy to intentionally walk that final hitter. But then the gall of Montana Faust to hit that final strike dead down the center, right over the plate, just daring that hitter to take a swing at it.
That's Montana Faust for you. She's ended multiple games this season with strike three, with a strikeout. I think that, as a team as a whole, I think Montana really trusts her defense. And I played softball in high school, and I really think that the decision to intentionally walk the batter was really great on Murphy's part as well. Even if Montana wasn't able to get a called third strike, say you got a hit, if the bases are loaded, it's easier to get the third out of the inning because you can throw to any base and home plate. So I think if Montana didn't deliver the way that Murphy wanted her to, I think it easily, the game could have ended there because the defense is so solid on the diamond.
Yeah. Contrary to what we saw at Alabama baseball today, Alabama softball's outfielders always in the right position. You talked about the small ball aspect, and that's something that I've been focused on as I've kind of been paying attention more and more towards as we've gotten deeper into the postseason. It feels like there's more scheme, like it's a more intelligent approach to the diamond sport to play this small ball, to just use your speed as an advantage, and then allow your power to come in and send all the speed home. And I really appreciate that. Like it allows me to kind of learn the sport at a consistent pace, and also understand why fans are so frustrated with baseball, because it feels like it's a home run, a pop fly, or a strike. But as we move further into the postseason, assuming that Alabama can get out with Kentucky, and we'll talk about the weekend series after this one, but assuming Alabama can't continue their season, how does this small ball kind of translate with other teams that have an easier time of getting home runs? We saw it a little bit today where, Kentucky was able to get a few home runs and Alabama was still able to contend. But if there's teams, you think about a Florida or an Oklahoma where, these teams can pop off home runs at any given moment, how does that small ball kind of compete with those heavy hitting teams?
I think it kind of depends on your opponent. I'm a big fan of small ball, especially because Alabama has speed. They're not a home run hitting team, as opposed to, I've been watching a lot of the postseason games just from other teams. UCLA, home run hitting team. Florida, home run hitting team. I think that the challenge is moving forward, should they move on to Oklahoma City, is that Montana and Lexi, whoever else is going to pitch, they can't pitch in straight down the middle, because if that happens, it's a home run guaranteed. But I think that what Alabama has to do with small ball is just trust in their speed. And I think I've seen it multiple times throughout the season, base hit after base hit, get your runners on, bring up your power, trust in your teammates. As long as you have a runner on base and you can get something done, that's key. But the problem is, because they're not huge home run hitters, you can lose the game to teams who can put 2 on and then hit a 3-run home run that way.
Right.
I think it really, something that I thought about the other day, I think it hurts Alabama a little bit to not have Bailey Dowling in their lineup anymore. She got injured. She was one of their she's a freshman, really great home run hitter. And I think that if you had her in the lineup, you would have a better chance of hitting more home runs and getting more runs that way. But because you don't have that, the team has to work with what they've got. And I think that that's small ball, and it could really work in the series. You see, Alyssa Brown, Alexis Mack, lots of bunting and slapping, which I haven't really seen from a lot of the other teams just watching their games. And speed kills. And so if Alabama can use that to their advantage, I think it's a good matchup, in my opinion.
Definitely agree. We're talking to Katie Holac, one of our own here at Tide 100.9. She's an intern, but she spends quite a bit of her time in the Rhodes House covering the Alabama softball team. She was there today for the incredible victory for the Crimson Tide over the Kentucky Wildcats. It's the first of a 3-game series. Should it require it, the Crimson Tide will again host the Wildcats tomorrow. Katie, what's the impression you get on what Alabama is going to try to switch up, what Kentucky is going to try to switch up, and who might we see in the circle for Alabama tomorrow? Just an overall preview of what we're going to have in the Rhodes House tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure which way either of the teams are going to go. This is a chance, tomorrow's game is a chance for Alabama to secure the win and move on without having to play game 3. So depending on how Montana's feeling, I don't know whether or not Coach Murphy wants to start her or not. But I think your best bet, Montana threw, 134 pitches today. So I think that if she's too tired to start, he'll probably put Kilfoyle in. But again, Kilfoyle has only pitched 9 innings or so in like a month since she was injured. So I think that Montana has the likeliness to start, and then maybe Kilfoyle switches out. I think that Kentucky would go with Humes again, but they have a great pitching staff. I saw it at SEC tournament when they played Georgia. I can't be in the coach's head, but if I were the coaches, I would say, hey, if my number 1 starting pitcher is up for it, I'm going to start you again to give my team the best chance, especially if you're Coach Murphy, to win this game 2 and just be done. Because 3-game series are just brutal. And the last time we played Kentucky in a series during the regular season, we lost that series. So I think Coach Murphy if I were him, I would think get it done in 2 and just be done and have those days to relax before Oklahoma.
No doubt. And this team does seem like they're well on their way to a trip to the College World Series in Oklahoma City. Katie, thanks so much for hanging out with us. You can follow her on the Twitter machine at K_Holac, HOLEC. She provides all of the excellent updates for Tide 100.9 right there in the Rhodes House, alongside JR Moore most of the time, too. Katie, thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Enjoy your night. Enjoy your weekend. We will take a break. Come back. JR, I see you're on the line. Don't go anywhere. We'll get to you, sir. Your phone calls, 205-342-9904 for the remainder of the show. Guest free. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Hit the like, share, and subscribe. It's the best way to enjoy the show, guys. Check it out. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. I'm Jacob Harrison. We're having a lot of fun here on a Friday night. It's first Friday night in a long time. We're guest free for the rest of the show. So your phone calls, 205-342-9904. You can jump onto the streams, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can leave a comment in there. We'll interact with you there as well. JR has been waiting a minute since our conversation with Katie. So we'll welcome JR. No, we're not going to welcome JR because he left. He's gone. No problem. We'll just keep trudging along. 205-342-9904. If you want to join the show, you can hop in immediately. So what we are going to discuss then is the positivity circulating around a certain AFC East quarterback. Not yours, Katie. Kim. I'm sorry. We were just talking to Katie. Kim, our new intern here on Off the Edge.
Of vodka?
Hey, it's late. What am I going to do? I'm late. It's late. It's 8:30, Tommy. It's not natural.
Listen, all right? Just think of the cartoon Kim Possible and go from there. Call me, beat me if you want to reach her.
Wow. I haven't heard that phrase in a long time. Kim is our resident Patriots fan who sits in there and tortures Tommy and reminds him about Super Bowl 50 over and over and over and over and over again. Not that AFC East quarterback. No, not Mac Jones, but Tua Tagovailoa has gotten a lot of positive publicity here in recent times. You know, he's come back, he's jacked up. Like he's filled out, he's gotten into the weight room, put on some extra pounds, put on some hefty muscle. And, you know, like you don't need like Tim Tebow running around out there where you're cut out of stone or anything, veins puncturing your skin or whatever. No, but he's gotten a full off season to get healthy, to put the weight back on, and to feel good about where his body is. But not only that, he's got a full off season to get mentally sharp. In a recent press conference following OTA, Tua talked about how he struggled with the playbook because of all the things that he had to go through, coming off the hip injury, serving as the backup, a disrupted offseason due to COVID. All those sorts of things kind of play into that. And nonetheless, he still starts 9 games, wins 6 of 3, has the Miami Dolphins in the thick of the playoff race. They named him the starter because the Dolphins were in the thick of the playoff race early in the season. And now you kind of add in everything he's got going on, right? You add in Jalen Waddle as the first round draft pick. You add in Will Fuller, who opted out of the season last year. And that team returns a lot of pieces defensively. My biggest questions for the Dolphins and how they're going to help Tua out, because they've got the wide receivers now. Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle. That is a hell of a wide receiving core. Mike Gesicki at tight end. Good job. The defense is stacked. What's the offensive line situation? Because newsflash, the New England Patriots went out and signed Matthew Judon. The New England Patriots went out and got back Kyle Van Noy, who you inexplicably let go. So after last year, first of all, you over there smiling, Kim. The Patriots spent almost all of their draft last year on tight ends and edge rushers. And then this offseason, they spent all of their cap space on tight ends and edge rushers. So those guys that they drafted don't look like they're panning out too well. But nonetheless, I mean, the guys that they've got now, though, are legit. Like they're good players that will help that team get back to a competitive state. And when you look at Miami's offensive line, and that's, you know, that's a division much like the AFC North where every single team is in it, with the exception of one. In the AFC North, it's the Bengals. In the AFC East, it's the Jets. But the other 3 teams are all vying for that spot. And while it is possible now for 2 teams to, or excuse me, 2 divisions to send all 3 teams to the playoffs, it's not going to be easy to compete with that. I mean, all 3 teams in the AFC North, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Browns, they're all bringing it, and they're all gunning for the AFC Championship. And then on the other side, with the East, you've got the Patriots are looking to rebound and call last year a fluke. The Bills are one of the best teams in the entire NFL, and the Dolphins are looking to expound upon what they accomplished last year. Not even to mention what's going on out in the West, because the Chargers look like they're on the up and up. The Raiders look like they're on the up and up, and the Chiefs are the best team in football. So you have to find a way to maneuver all of this with a bad offensive line and no running game. Like, I love that Tua's coming back in a real way. I love that Tua's got confidence back. I love that he feels comfortable in the playbook. I love that they're giving him checks now at the line of scrimmage. I love that they gave him a wide receiving core. And hey, drafting Jalen Phillips with the 18th overall pick, it was better than taking Najee Harris. I promise you. Like, you won't regret that. You won't. But you still have such a massive question at running back. Really and truly. You are going to regret not taking Najee Harris with that pick. And you still have to figure out what's the situation with this offensive line, because it's the free agent additions are journeyman, very, very average kind of guys. And we all love DJ Fluker here in Tuscaloosa, but he's been a journeyman for a reason. So you plug him in at guard if you want to, at right tackle if you want to see him struggle. This Matt Skura guy, not great. That's why the Ravens didn't hold on to him. And the other three are all rookies. So now you've got to pray that those guys are going to turn it around and contribute on the level that you had hoped that they could. Now with it going into the second season, it's not going to be easy by any means. I don't know if the Dolphins really improved to the point where they sustained that lead above the Patriots that they gathered for themselves last year. Very, very questionable, because on the other side of that is Mac Jones and Cam Newton and all the things that the Patriots added. And we'll talk about that next on the other side of this break. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. We're discussing the positives that were going around Tua Tagovailoa, and I kind of turned all those positives into negatives because of all the negativity that is around him as far as his offensive line goes. And a lot of that has to do with all the additions that the Patriots made, including their quarterback, Mac Jones. And it's very interesting. I actually saw it today where by the end of the year, the starting quarterback, starting running back, and the number one wide receiver could all be Alabama alumni and allow the Patriots to have the most Alabama Crimson Tide players on their roster. It all comes full circle, right? It would be very interesting. I do think that's the best landing spot for Julio. I'm sorry. It's better than the Ravens. It's better than the Browns, and the Titans can't do it. So it just kind of is what it is. I'm sorry, Tommy. But regardless, until that is the case, it still comes down to Cam Newton and his battle with Mac Jones. Now, first of all, do go check out Kim's article on Mac Jones, Tide109.com, all the positive rumors going on about him, the way that he's performed at rookie minicamp and at OTAs. He's put on a show, and he's surprised people. It's getting late. He has surprised people with the way that he carries himself on the field. Gary put it very well this morning on his show, the Gary Harris Show, how he's very aw shucks, like when he's in interviews and when he's talking to the media. He kind of has that goofy little laugh and trying to just project himself, right? And then he gets on the field, he's just a completely different beast. He's the Joker at that point. He's the guy that carries a swagger about him, knows how intelligent he is, knows how accurate he is, knows how lethal he can be with the football. And that's what makes him so special, is because when he gets on the field, he's a different beast. Now, listen, Cam Newton the same way. When Cam Newton's on a football field, different guy. He's been to the pinnacle, and he wants to get back there. Otherwise, he'd have called it quits after last year, because last year was horrendous, terrible. But he's got an opportunity, and they've put weapons around either one of these guys. I think the Patriots sneakily put together, despite losing pieces, put together the best offensive line in football. Maybe the Browns are better. Almost definitely the Browns are better. I'm sorry. The Browns have the best roster in football, and I hate it. But the Patriots have a great offensive line. They've taken care of that. They've got a running back core that you can feel good about, especially behind that offensive line. And they solidified the offensive pieces. Now, there's still question marks at wide receiver. I do like Kendrick Bourne, but at the same time, like, unproven commodity. I like going back to the 2 tight end sets. That worked out really well in the past. Now, with Hunter Henry and what's his name? Kim, what's his name? What is his name? The kid from Tennessee. Jonnu Smith. Both of those guys are gonna light things up and give Cam Newton shorter opportunities. Now, granted, saw a lot of slant passes go directly in the dirt with Cam Newton last year, but those safer dump off passes are going to make it a lot easier on Cam. And then eventually, when it is Mac Jones, this entire team is going to be ready to pick right back up where it was 3 years ago with Tom Brady, 2 years ago. And that just speaks to the brilliance of Bill Belichick. It's very similar to Nick Saban. Of course, they come from the same lineage, but the way that they're able to rebuild their teams. And what's more impressive, I think, with the way that Bill Belichick does it is he often does it without those superstar caliber players. Nick Saban always has 5 stars. There's a 5-star at every position, always, at all times. With Bill Belichick, that's not always the case. He's done a lot with very little. The wide receiving core, outside of Randy Moss, Tom Brady worked with a lot of just mediocre guys and turned a lot of mediocre guys into great players too. Think of Wes Welker. Now, the tight ends have traditionally been pretty good. And the running backs, every now and then you've got a great one like Corey Dillon, and other times you're trying to figure out what you're going to actually do with James White. And the lawyer Malloy and the law firm guy, they've run through a lot of players in New England. The defense has always stayed consistently good, but they are constantly interchanging players and trying to figure out what the right makeup is of that team. They constantly, alter the scheme to allow players to be in the best position for them to succeed. And it's really the brilliance of what he pulls off, Bill Belichick. And that's why I think no matter what they decide to do with Mac Jones, he's set up for success. Because at the end of the day, Bill Belichick's not getting any younger. And he's not going to go out a loser. It's not going to happen. I think that's why they were so vicious in free agency, why they put off the image that they were going to be aggressive in the draft. Of course, in true Bill Belichick fashion, they sit at 15 and get exactly what they want. But they've formulated something here where Bill can't be wrong, because they went out and picked up guys who are proven. Like they've already solidified their place in the NFL. Are they all elite guys? No. There's pieces on that offensive line that are elite. But you've got an opportunity to continue to build. And if you do bring in Julio Jones, then regardless of who's the quarterback, week 3 or week 15, you're going to feel good about your chances to win because of all the pieces around on this team. It's always going to be difficult in the NFL to win when you don't have the quarterback situation figured out. But I think the Patriots have done a good job of putting enough pieces around their quarterbacks to where they don't have to do all of the work. And in turn, that allows them to be better versions of themselves. As far as Cam being a better pocket passing quarterback that can't rely on his athleticism as much and has to force his arm to do the things that it used to be able to do. And with Mac Jones learning how to be a professional quarterback, all those things kind of tie in together. And I think at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, Mac Jones is set up for better long-term success right now than even Tua Tagovailoa is, and much more so than Jalen Hurts. So, I mean, we've got 3 quarterbacks in the NFL from Alabama, and I think all 3 are set up to have good success. But right now, the one in the best position is Mac Jones. And it really pains me because all these years of strife that the Patriots have given me, still feel very, very good about the situation that he's in with the Patriots. So thinking back on some of the other topics throughout the day, in the last segment, we'll dive into some of the defensive linemen on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Of course, today, Alabama softball was victorious 4-3 over Kentucky to bring the series to 1-0. Alabama wide receivers coach promoted to assistant head offensive coach. Holloman Wiggins, who has been the wide receivers coach today, was announced as the assistant head coach of offense, that being visible on rolltide.com. So if you want to check out that story, you can. Tide 100.9. Our man Joe Gaither was all on top of it. Alabama baseball losing 11-0 over in Hoover to the Tennessee Volunteers. And of course, Mac Jones impressing at OTAs. All those stories and more at Tide109.com. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We will discuss the incredible depth on this defensive line. I know we got into it a little bit last week with Joey, but I wasn't able to give my concise thoughts on it. So we'll do that here in the final segment as we close down the weekend here on Off the Edge. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.